We got another ultimate burning question for you from @Irish in Buffalo, also via Instagram. How much of the blame for Georgia's off-the-field issues is on Kirby Smart? This, of course, in response to two more players suspended late last week after driving-related incidents. Feels like deja vu all over again. Brad, how much of this is on Kirby?
Look, Kirby Smart's not behind the wheel of these Hellcats, but he's the leader of this program, and it's his responsibility to try and stop his players becoming a public safety danger to the city of Athens. When we've seen, 26 arrests since January 2023, and they've all been speed and traffic related. At some point, the buck stops with one of the college football's highest paid coaches. Look, I mean, we worship this guy for his two titles the last 4 seasons. He's put more players in the NFL draft the last 5 cycles than anybody nationally now that Nick Saban has retired. But now it's, time to ask Kirby Smart these tough questions. How do you put a stop to this just nuisance that's happening in Athens with these speed related arrests? And I think part of the issue is, you have 18 and 19-year-old rookie or second or third year drivers getting behind these 180-mile-an-hour sports cars, and that's a major problem. So I do think it's time to start, as national media analysts, asking Kirby, man, what's up? This has to end soon.
He's arguably the best coach in college football, but it does not excuse him from criticism, which you mentioned it. You mentioned the stats there in terms of how many players have gotten citations or been arrested since January 2023. And one of those things that happened was a fatality in 2023. And then you look at what happened after. So we always talked about it. We talked about it in Washington. One of the greatest people I ever worked with, people, not coaches, Chris Peterson, always used to say about the players and the individuals in that locker room. They either meet the standard of what you want as people for your locker room or they do not. And if they don't meet the standard, then you move on in a different direction. And at some point, either in the identification process or when you had them on campus, you failed those people. That's exactly what's being happening right now in Athens. You think about these kids that are making really poor decisions consistently. And that's happened over the last 2 years that we have seen this. And you said it, Brad. He's not behind the wheel, but he is the guy that is the leader of the program. And something is not getting through to these guys at the end of the day that this is completely unacceptable. I mean, for heaven's sakes, make them ride bikes, take a scooter, do whatever you got to do at the end of the day. Get them an Uber, because we're not talking about missing football games. We're talking about people's lives. So how many times does this have to happen for it to really get the message through that it's unacceptable? And that's where it is. And I will say this. I'm sure Kirby Smart understands that, but they have to continue to evaluate why the message is not getting through, because it is completely unacceptable and it continues to happen, which means, hey, something from head coach to the rest of the personnel on Georgia staff to their players, the example is not being made that this is something that can continue to happen.
Yeah, we've seen dozens of power coaches. Almost every program nationally now has a zero tolerance policy toward domestic violence related issues. So why not have the same thing toward speed issues that harm others, not only players, but other citizens on the road? This is becoming pretty much an epidemic now at Georgia because it's happening so often during the off season. It's happening during fall camp. It's happened during the season. And as you mentioned, Coop, it has resulted in loss of life. I mean, that's the red alert stop button for all of this once that happens. So it's time Georgia starts taking this a lot more seriously as they do some other more personal and serious related arrest.
That was 2 years ago. Since then, 21 players have had some trouble with the law as it pertains to driving-related incidents, which, as you said, usually it's like, what, does somebody have to die for something like this to raise your attention? And that did happen. But something you said, Brad, I thought was interesting is, the age group that they're in and NIL, and they have more money and everything. Georgia's not the only place where that's happening. I think how much does that concern you, that it's not isolated at Georgia, but man, the problem is way bigger there than anywhere else across the country?
I mean, give these guys a V6 Mustang. You don't have to go 180 miles an hour down a road and completely lose control of a car. That's what these players are doing. They're speed. Some have had speed racing incidents. I mean, it's very unsafe for the citizens of Athens right now and some of these players. I mean, if I'm the parents of a 4 or 5-star athlete who signs with Kirby Smart, I want some, knowledge of the situation. Is my son going to get behind a, V8 horsepower Challenger or Charger? I mean, what is he going to be as far as safety concerns in Athens? And I would be somewhat worried because now we've seen more than 24 arrests for the same thing. Kirby Smart has said at media days on the record that it has been addressed internally, and they've had guys on campus talk about, slowing down. I mean, it's whatever Kirby Smart has done, it's obviously not getting through to players. And through the NIL faction at Georgia, they've got to stop giving the keys to these high-powered engines.
Yeah, I think ultimately at the end of the day, for Kirby Smart, he's in a situation where the expectations are incredibly high in Athens, right? And talent equals tolerance. Smoke talked about that a couple weeks ago on this show, but when you're talking about these type of players, unfortunately, sometimes when these guys get in trouble, you're looking at your roster and you're saying, well, can't lose this guy, right? If we're trying to make a run at the national championship, then I need to have my 6th, my 7th offensive lineman. So what does that look like? And ultimately, how does that factor into your decisions when it comes to a disciplinary conduct? And I think that's the point right now that I think Kirby Smart and his staff that I trust are trying to figure out and navigate and ultimately trying to prevent how this continues to happen and how do they find a way to stop it. So like I said, I don't doubt the fact that Kirby Smart cares and him and his staff are working around the clock to try to figure out a way to prevent this. Something is not happening, and I think they're at the point where they have to look at a lot of different strategies for how they can go forward to prevent something like this from happening, reoccurring in the future.
Yeah, ultimately it's up for debate how much of this falls on the head coach, Kirby Smart. But what's not up for debate is whatever's been done is clearly not enough because this does continue to happen. Brad Crawford, thank you for being here for the Ultimate Burning Questions. Some fun ones, some heavy ones. That's why we bring you on. You can handle it all. We so appreciate it. And thank you so much for watching the Ultimate College Football Show. Hit that like button on the way out and make sure to come join us every Monday and Wednesday right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. We'll see you Wednesday.